The autumn rain had followed King Edmund's army for 3 days as they rode through the mountain passes toward the capital. By the time the castle's towers rose against the gray evening sky, every man was soaked to the bone and dreaming of hearth fires and warm beds. Edmund had sent no ravens ahead to announce their early return. The campaign in the borderlands had ended a full week ahead of schedule. The rebel lords had surrendered after just 2 decisive battles, their morale broken by his cavalry's lightning strikes. His advisors had suggested they rest at Thornhaven Keep before the final push home, but Edmund had declined. After a month away, he wanted nothing more than to hold Isolde again, to breathe in the lavender scent of her hair and tell her of his victories. The castle guards scrambled to attention as he dismounted in the courtyard, their surprise evident. Edmund waved off the steward who came rushing from the great hall, his questions tumbling out in a nervous stream. "See to my men," Edmund said, already striding toward the keep. "Hot food and dry quarters. I'll announce our return properly in the morning." He took the winding stairs to the royal apartments 2 at a time, despite the weariness in his legs. Mud from the road still clung to his boots. His sword belt needed adjusting. None of it mattered. He'd clean up after surprising his wife with an embrace. The corridor leading to their bedchamber was quiet, lit only by a few flickering torches. Most of the servants would be at supper in the lower halls. Edmund smiled at the thought of having Isolde to himself, even if just for an hour before duty called him to councils and reports. He pushed open the heavy oak door without knocking. It was his own chamber, after all. The scene before him arrived in fragments, each detail searing itself into his mind with brutal clarity. Isolde's dark hair spilled across their pillows, her pale skin gleaming in the candlelight. The boy, Rowan, the servant who'd served them wine at dinner countless times, moving above her with desperate urgency. His wife's fingers digging into the youth's back. The sounds of their passion, shameless and consuming. For a heartbeat, perhaps 2, no one moved. Edmund stood frozen in the doorway, the rain still dripping from his cloak onto the stone floor. Then Isolde's eyes opened and found his. Her mouth formed a perfect circle of horror. Rowan jerked his head around, his young face draining of all color. The silence stretched between them like a drawn bowstring, quivering with terrible potential. Edmund's hand moved to the pommel of his sword, not drawing it, just resting there as his mind struggled to process what his eyes had witnessed. What happened next would be remembered by all 3 of them, for whatever time they had left. Hi friends, if you're hooked in and ready to enjoy what happens in this heated moment with King Edmund, please click subscribe, and let me know in the comments where you're watching from, because tomorrow I'll be giving you another story as interesting as this one so you don't miss it. Let's keep going. Edmund's fingers tightened on the pommel of his sword, the leather grip familiar and grounding. The sound of steel sliding from its scabbard filled the chamber, a whisper that promised violence. Rowan scrambled backward off the bed, his legs tangling in his breeches as he fell hard against the floor. "Your Majesty, I please." "Silence." Edmund's voice came out flat, dead. He'd used that tone on the battlefield when ordering executions. Isolde sat up slowly, pulling the silk sheets against her chest. Her face had gone from flushed with pleasure to pale as moonlight. She didn't reach for her nightgown, didn't try to cover herself further. Perhaps she understood that modesty was meaningless now. "Edmund," she said, and her voice carried a steadiness that surprised him. "Let me explain." "Explain." The word tasted like ash in his mouth. "What explanation suffices for this?" He gestured with his blade at the rumpled bed, at Rowan cowering on the floor, at the entire damning tableau. The boy had begun to weep, silent tears streaming down his smooth cheeks. He couldn't have been more than 19 summers. How long had this been happening? Edmund's mind reeled backward through the past year. How many nights had he lain beside Isolde, unaware that she'd welcomed another into their bed? How many times had Rowan served them at table, meeting Edmund's eyes with that deferential bow, all while knowing the taste of the Queen's lips? "How long?" Edmund asked. Isolde's jaw tightened. "Does it matter?" "Answer me." She flinched at his shout but held his gaze. 6 months since the spring festival. 6 months. Half a year of lies. Half a year of her body pressed against his in the darkness, her whispered words of love, her smiles across the council chamber, all of it a performance, all of it false. "Get up," Edmund said to Rowan. "Get dressed." The boy fumbled with his clothing, his hands shaking so badly he could barely manage the laces. Edmund watched him with something approaching fascination. This was what Isolde had chosen, this trembling youth with his pretty face and slim shoulders. Edmund had killed men twice this boy's size in the borderlands. He'd split shields and crushed helms. He'd earned his crown through blood and steel and the respect of warriors. And here stood his replacement, barely able to tie his own breeches. "Edmund, please," Isolde's voice cracked now. "Let Rowan go, this is between you and me." "You don't give commands here anymore," Edmund said softly. "You surrendered that right the moment you spread your legs for this boy in my bed." He raised his sword, and both Isolde and Rowan went rigid with fear. Then Edmund made his decision. Edmund lowered his sword, but not to strike. Instead, he drove the blade point first into the wooden floor between them, where it stood quivering like a declaration. "Strip," he commanded. Rowan's eyes went wide with terror. "Your Majesty, please." "Not you, boy. You're already half undressed." Edmund's gaze shifted to Isolde. "My wife, I want to see what drove you to this betrayal. Show me what made you risk everything." Isolde's hands trembled as she let the sheet fall. She stood beside the bed, naked and vulnerable, her chin lifted in defiance even as shame colored her cheeks. Edmund circled her slowly, his boots heavy on the stone floor, studying her as if seeing her for the first time. "Beautiful," he murmured. "I've always known that, but beauty isn't rare in a kingdom, Isolde. So what is it? What does this boy give you that I cannot?" The question hung in the air. Rowan started to speak, but Edmund silenced him with a raised hand. "Let her answer." Isolde's voice came out raw. "You want the truth? He makes me feel alive. You're always at war, always planning the next campaign, the next conquest. When you're here, you're still not here. Your mind is in battle tents and throne rooms. Rowan sees me. He wants me, not the crown I wear or the alliance I brought you." Edmund absorbed this like a physical blow. He'd expected tears, apologies, perhaps even lies, not this brutal honesty. "And you, boy," Edmund turned to Rowan, "do you love her?" Rowan's throat worked. "Yes, Your Majesty. God help me, yes, I never meant I tried to resist." "But you didn't." Edmund pulled his sword from the floor, and both of them tensed. He walked to the window, looking out at his castle, his kingdom, everything he'd built and bled for. When he turned back, his expression was unreadable. "I should have you both executed. It would be just, expected." He paused. "But I find myself curious." "Curious," Isolde breathed. Edmund's lips curved into something that wasn't quite a smile. "I've been at war for 10 years. I've conquered territories, crushed rebellions, expanded our borders. But what have I conquered here? What have I built with you, Isolde, except an empty throne room and a cold bed?" He approached them both, his presence commanding. "So here is my proposition. I will not kill either of you. Instead, I want to understand what I've been missing. I want to see what you see in each other." Isolde's breath caught. "What are you saying?" "I'm saying show me." Edmund's voice dropped to something dangerous and hungry. "Right now, both of you, show me this passion that made you betray your king, your vows, your honor. Let me witness what was worth risking your lives for." The silence that followed was suffocating. "You're mad," Isolde whispered, but her eyes searched his face, trying to understand. "Perhaps." Edmund began removing his armor, the buckles and straps coming undone with practiced efficiency. "Or perhaps I'm the only sane one here. You two have been playing at love in the shadows while I've been playing at king. Maybe it's time we all stopped pretending." Rowan found his voice, though it shook. "Your Majesty, I don't understand." "It's quite simple." Edmund's breastplate hit the floor with a heavy clang. "I'm giving you a choice. Perform for me now, show me this great love affair, or I call my guards and have you both tried for treason at dawn. The dungeons are cold this time of year, and the executioner's blade is sharp. Isolde stepped forward, her nakedness now a kind of armor. And what do you get from this humiliation, Edmund? What do you gain? Truth, the word came out fierce. For once in our marriage, I want truth. No more performed affection. No more duty disguised as desire. I want to see you as you really are, not as the perfect queen you've pretended to be. Something shifted in Isolde's expression, surprise giving way to understanding, then to something else entirely. She looked at Rowan, then back at Edmund. You're not angry, she said slowly. You're jealous, not of him having me, but of us having something real. Edmund's jaw clenched. She'd struck closer to the mark than he wanted to admit. How many nights had he lain awake in campaign tents, wondering if Isolde missed him? How many times had he returned home to dutiful kisses that felt rehearsed? Does it matter why? He asked. Isolde moved closer to him, close enough that he could smell her skin. What if I said yes? What if we show you everything? What then, Edmund? What happens after? Edmund met her eyes, and for the first time in years, he saw not his queen but the woman he'd married, fierce, complicated, alive. Then perhaps, he said quietly, we find a new way forward, all three of us. The chamber seemed to shrink around them, the air thick with anticipation and fear. Rowan remained frozen, his eyes darting between the king and queen like a trapped animal seeking escape. Well, Edmund settled into the high-backed chair near the hearth, spreading his legs in a posture of absolute authority. The firelight cast dancing shadows across his face. I'm waiting. Show me what treason looks like. Isolde's breath came faster now. She turned to Rowan, whose face had gone pale as parchment. It's all right, she whispered, though her voice trembled. Look at me, only at me. My queen, I cannot, not with him watching. You could when you thought him 100 miles away, Edmund interjected coldly. What's changed? I'm simply closer now. Consider me a piece of furniture, a very interested piece of furniture. Isolde reached for Rowan's face, turning it toward her own. Her fingers traced his jawline with a tenderness that made Edmund's chest tighten. Trust me, she murmured. She kissed him then, not the chaste kiss of courtly affection, but deep and consuming. Rowan resisted for only a heartbeat before his hands found her waist, pulling her against him. The passion between them was immediate, undeniable. Edmund watched as his wife's fingers worked at Rowan's half-fastened tunic, pushing it from his shoulders. The boy's hands roamed her body with a familiarity that spoke of countless stolen moments. They moved toward the bed, their bodies already entwining. Stop! Edmund's command cut through the moment like a blade. They froze, Isolde's leg already wrapped around Rowan's hip. Not on our marital bed, Edmund said, his voice hoarse. There, on the floor, on your knees, Isolde. Color flooded Isolde's cheeks. Shame or arousal, Edmund couldn't tell. Perhaps both. She sank to her knees on the thick carpet and Rowan followed, his breathing ragged. Show me how you pleasure him, Edmund commanded. Show me what a queen does for a servant boy. Isolde's hands shook as she reached for Rowan's breeches, unlacing them completely. The boy groaned as she freed him, his youth evident in his immediate response to her touch. She looked back at Edmund, defiance blazing in her eyes even as she lowered her head. Edmund gripped the arms of his chair, his knuckles white. He'd thought watching would give him power, would let him master this betrayal. Instead, he felt something unexpected stirring, not just rage, but a dark fascination. The sounds Rowan made, the way Isolde's hair cascaded over her shoulders, the intimacy of their forbidden connection, it was intoxicating in its wrongness. Does he taste different than a king? Edmund asked, his voice rough. Isolde pulled back, her lips wet. He tastes like honey and desperation, she said. You taste like iron and duty. The words should have enraged him. Instead, they struck something deeper. Continue, Edmund commanded. Time became fluid in the firelit chamber. Edmund watched as Isolde brought Rowan to the edge again and again, her expertise evident in how she read every tremor of his body. The boy was lost in sensation, his head thrown back, fingers tangled in her dark hair. Enough, Edmund said finally, rising from his chair. His own body betrayed him with its response to the scene before him. Lay her down, boy. Show me how you take what's mine. Rowan's eyes met his, still frightened but now burning with something else, a primal need that overcame even his terror. He guided Isolde onto her back, her body sprawled on the carpet like an offering. She spread her legs without hesitation, and Edmund saw the evidence of her arousal glistening in the firelight. Look at me while he enters you, Edmund commanded, kneeling beside them now, close enough to see everything. I want to see your face when you take him. Isolde's eyes locked with his as Rowan positioned himself between her thighs. The moment of penetration drew a gasp from both of them, her back arching, his hips pressing forward with urgent need. Edmund watched his wife's face transform with pleasure as another man thrust into her. Her mouth fell open, her eyes glazed with ecstasy. This was the woman he'd never seen, uninhibited, wild, free of the crown's weight. Harder, Edmund heard himself say. Show me why she risks everything for you. Rowan obeyed, his young body driving into the queen with increasing desperation. The sounds of their coupling filled the chamber, skin against skin, breathless moans, whispered endearments. Isolde's nails raked down Rowan's back, leaving red trails. Edmund's hand moved to his own body, unable to resist. The sight before him was obscene, devastating, and impossibly arousing. His wife, his property, his queen being taken by a boy half his age, and he was complicit in it. More than complicit, he was orchestrating it. Tell me you love him, Edmund demanded, his voice thick. Say it while he's inside you. Isolde's eyes never left Edmund's face. I love him, she gasped as Rowan thrust deeper. I love how he makes me feel. I love his gentleness and his hunger. I love... Her words dissolved into a cry of pleasure. Edmund felt something crack inside his chest. Not just his pride or his honor, but something more fundamental. The careful walls he'd built around his heart, the armor he'd worn even in his own bedchamber, all of it crumbling. And me, the question escaped before he could stop it. Did you ever love me, Isolde? She reached for him then, her hand finding his face even as Rowan continued moving above her. Her touch was electric, intimate in a way their marriage bed had never been. Yes, she whispered, her voice breaking. But you never let me see you like this, raw and real and wanting. You gave me a crown and called it love. Rowan shuddered above her, his climax imminent. Edmund caught the boy's face in his other hand, forcing him to meet his eyes. Finish inside her, Edmund commanded. Give her what I never could. Rowan collapsed against Isolde with a final shuddering cry, his release overtaking him. For a moment, there was only the sound of ragged breathing and the crackling fire. Then Edmund stood abruptly, turning away from them both. Get dressed, he said quietly, both of you. Isolde and Rowan exchanged uncertain glances as they fumbled for their clothes. The passion that had filled the room moments before evaporated, replaced by a suffocating tension. Edmund walked to his desk and poured 3 goblets of wine with steady hands. Drink, he commanded, handing them each a cup. You'll need it. Rowan's hand trembled as he accepted the goblet. Your Majesty, what happens now? Will you? Kill you? Edmund's laugh was hollow. No, boy, something far worse, I'm afraid. He drained his own wine in one swallow. Tell me, have either of you heard the legend of King Aldrich the Wise? Isolde frowned, pulling her robe closed. The king from 3 centuries ago, the one who supposedly went mad. Not mad, cursed. Edmund refilled his goblet, his movements deliberate. My family doesn't speak of it, but every firstborn son is told the truth on his coronation day. Aldrich wasn't the first of our line to wear this crown, but he was the first to understand what it truly meant. He lifted the crown from where it sat on the mantel, turning it in the firelight. The ancient gold seemed to absorb the flames rather than reflect them. What are you talking about? Isolde's voice carried an edge of fear now. The crown chooses Isolde, not the man who wears it, but the crown itself. It feeds on genuine emotion, real love, real passion, real connection. Things I stopped feeling the moment they placed this on my head 10 years ago. Edmund's eyes were distant now, haunted. Every king in our line becomes hollow, a perfect ruler, a flawless strategist, and absolutely empty inside. Rowan stood frozen, wine forgotten in his hand. That's impossible. Is it? Edmund turned to face them fully. Tell me, Isolde, when did I change? When did your husband become the man who could plan battles in his sleep but couldn't remember the last time he truly laughed? Isolde's face had gone ashen. After your coronation, I thought it was the weight of responsibility. It was the weight of this. Edmund held up the crown. And tonight, for the first time in a decade, I felt something real. Rage, jealousy, desire, pain. His voice cracked. Do you understand what that means? Watching you two together broke something in me, or perhaps it broke the crown's hold. He moved to the window, looking out at the castle grounds below. My father died young, so did his father. Every king in our line either dies in battle or... He paused. Or they simply stop. Stop eating, stop drinking, stop existing. The crown takes everything until there's nothing left to take. Edmund, Isolde whispered, moving toward him. Why are you telling us this? He turned back to them, and his expression made both of them step back. Because tonight I made a choice. I felt something, and that feeling has consequences. The crown doesn't forgive resistance. As if to punctuate his words, a thin trail of blood began to drip from Edmund's nose. Your Majesty, Rowan rushed forward, but Edmund waved him off. It's already begun. I can feel it, the price for tonight's rebellion. He looked at Isolde with sudden fierce intensity. I need you to listen very carefully, both of you. When I collapse, and I will very soon, you must not let anyone place this crown on another head. Not my brother, not my cousin, no one. Edmund, no. Isolde's voice broke. Promise me. Blood dripped from his ears now, his body beginning to shake. The crown must be destroyed, melted down, cast into, he stumbled, catching himself against the desk. Into the Blackwater Gorge where even sorcery cannot retrieve it. More blood, running from his eyes like crimson tears. Rowan caught him as his legs gave out, lowering him carefully to the floor. Isolde knelt beside them, cradling Edmund's head. I'm sorry, Edmund gasped. Sorry I couldn't be the husband you needed. Sorry I let this thing steal me from you. But tonight I was real again, even if only for... His body convulsed once, violently, and then went still. Isolde's scream echoed through the chamber. Rowan's hands pressed frantically against Edmund's chest, trying to find a heartbeat. But the king's eyes stared sightlessly at the ceiling, still weeping blood. The crown lay on the floor beside them, its gold surface unmarred and gleaming. For a long moment, neither of them moved. Then Isolde reached for the crown with shaking hands. Don't, Rowan warned. You heard what he said. I know what he said. Isolde's voice was cold now, empty of the passion that had filled it earlier. She lifted the crown, studying it with an expression Rowan couldn't read. But he was already mad with jealousy, bleeding from the brain. We both saw how he broke tonight watching us, forcing us to. She trailed off, but her fingers caressed the crown's surface almost lovingly. Isolde, Rowan's voice was small, frightened. What are you doing? The queen stood slowly, the crown held before her. In the firelight, her face seemed transformed, no longer the woman who had gasped in pleasure beneath a servant boy, but something harder, something ancient. I'm thinking, she said softly, about what Edmund said, about how the crown feeds on genuine emotion, about how it chooses. She turned to Rowan, and her smile made his blood run cold. Tell me something, my love. Tonight, was it real? Did you truly desire me? Or were you simply too terrified to refuse? Rowan opened his mouth, but no sound came out. Isolde's smile widened. That's what I thought. She raised the crown toward her own head, and Rowan lunged forward to stop her, but his body wouldn't move. His legs had become leaden, immovable. He could only watch in horror as the ancient gold descended toward the queen's dark hair. No, he managed to whisper. Please, Isolde. Whatever Edmund said, whatever this is, don't. But the crown settled onto her head with a sound like a sigh, and Isolde's eyes rolled back in ecstasy or agony. Rowan couldn't tell which. When she opened them again, they were different, ancient, knowing. "Oh, my dear, foolish boy," she said, and her voice carried harmonics that hadn't been there before. "Did you truly think Edmund was the first, that this started with him?" She laughed, and the sound raised the hairs on Rowan's neck. "The crown doesn't curse kings, it creates them. And queens." She touched her temples, where the gold sat perfectly, as if made for her skull alone. "Queens have been creating them for far, far longer." Rowan's voice came out as barely a whisper. "Who are you?" Isolde, or the thing wearing her face, knelt beside Edmund's cooling corpse. She kissed his bloody lips tenderly. "The question, sweet Rowan, is who were you, and more importantly—" She looked up at him, and in her eyes he saw centuries of patient hunger. "Who will you become?" The chamber doors burst open. Guards flooded in, summoned by the queen's earlier scream. They saw their dead king, their blood-crowned queen, and a terrified servant boy frozen in place. "Rowan has murdered King Edmund," Isolde announced, her voice carrying perfect grief, perfect authority. "Seize him! He'll hang at dawn." As the guards grabbed him, Rowan found his voice at last. "You planned this, all of it, the affair, getting caught, everything." "Of course I did." Isolde's smile was radiant and terrible. "Every queen does eventually. How else do you think the crown passes down? How else do you think we ensure only the strongest vessel survives?" She gestured at Edmund's body. "He lasted longer than most. 10 years of feeding it with his emptiness, his perfect strategic mind. But the crown was hungry for something more." "What did you feed it?" Rowan screamed as the guards dragged him toward the door. "What did tonight give it?" Isolde touched the crown almost lovingly. "Genuine emotion, real betrayal, true death." Her eyes glittered. "A king who finally felt something, even if only at the end. That kind of power." She closed her eyes, savoring it. "That kind of power sustains for decades." The last thing Rowan saw before the dungeon doors closed was Queen Isolde standing in the window, crowned in gold and blood, gazing out at a kingdom that had no idea what truly ruled it. The crown glinted in the firelight, and somewhere in the depths of the castle, something ancient and patient began to laugh. 3 months later, Queen Isolde would announce her pregnancy to the court. 9 months after that, a son would be born, a boy with his father's dark hair and his mother's knowing eyes. They would name him Edmund, after the fallen king. And when he came of age, they would place the crown upon his head. The cycle would continue. It always did.